Welcome to Grown Dad Business. This is Aaron Kleiber. Here with Jason Clark.
Yes, sir. Big episode. Big one. Huge. It's one we've been waiting for.
Yeah, you did a yes sir.
Yes, sir.
Instead of a
damn.
Is that a thing now?
I don't know. Maybe next week.
Jason is a keychain you buy at the Dollar General that has all these like yes sir.
Yep. Hello.
Good night. And today we're starting our 2-part series on video games, and I'm here with my bestest friend growing up that I played video games the most with, and that is Chris Preksta.
Hello. Chris
Preksta is a director and a writer. You know him as directing Pittsburgh Dad and also The Mercury Men and Echo Torch.
I don't know that they already know me. I don't know that they just hear my name and go, oh, we know him from Pittsburgh Dad. I think
okay, but like...
There's probably I'm going to say 98% of the people listening are probably now for the first time.
All right. I was trying to tell everything that Chris did that's cooler than just Pittsburgh Dad, which I always feel bad. They were like, aren't you friends with that Pittsburgh Dad guy? And I'm like, you know he had a show on SyFy. All right, this week on Grown Dad Business.
Grown Dad Business with Aaron Kleiber. That's my dad. Hello! Underpants? That is hilarious. You should mouth to rate and review this podcast while my daddy will go into a deep depression. Going down business with Aaron Kleiber.
Bingo.
Yeah.
We're back with Grown Dad Business.
Yeah.
Am I going to do boom and then bingo?
That's what you've been doing.
Okay.
It's working.
Yeah, we've been wanting to talk about video games for a long time, and I instantly was like, oh, we have to have Chris talk about video games. If we're going to talk about the span of video games from when we were children to adults, I got to have Chris on.
I'm just thankful to be anywhere with anyone talking about video games, because the only person around me that is old enough to talk about them is my wife, and she's sick of hearing me talk about Zelda.
Yeah, that's we'll definitely get into that, but that's a good thing to start off right now. Is that what are we playing anything right now?
No.
You're playing the new Zelda.
I am playing the new Zelda.
I just found out a comedian friend of mine said that he was like, do you ever try that EA package? And I'm like, what's the EA package? For $5 a month, you can play almost any EA Electronic Arts game in their library. I've beaten 3 Battlefields in the last 2 weeks.
Is that across both platforms?
So it's not just sports. It's not just EA Sports.
Dude, they have all the Battlefields. They have and games I've been wanting to play forever, but I wasn't going to buy Battlefield because I was a Call of Duty guy.
Yep.
But we're gonna get into that. That'll be the second episode because we're gonna go in chronological order.
Mm-hmm.
And Jason, what are you playing right now? Like, are you still?
Nothing. I'm not playing anything right now.
Are you still? Are you still into Marbles and Jacks or?
Oh, here we go. Well, let's get out. We're gonna get this out of the way quick.
Are you?
Listen to this.
Like,
here we go, guys.
Explain your favorite video game. Hoop and stick, Jason.
The young guy. The young guy.
That's funny.
Look at the young guy.
That's
so
funny.
Cute.
What was the game that like grandmas and papaps would take that was like basically a mini suitcase that would just open into the game?
Pinochle.
No,
Backgammon.
Backgammon.
Backgammon. That's what it was.
I don't know why they were why they needed this little leather attaché case for this game.
Yeah, and for the listeners, they would tell you, anyone that's ever listened to an episode, we got that out of the way quick that I'm older than you. So I'm glad we got rid of it at the top. And
Jason,
now we can just go. No,
they need to make a leather attaché case for Mousetrap. You just you show up like you're about to play something like James Bond-ish, but then you open it up and there's like the little tub and the
That's
guy.
Genius.
And
That's so good.
Done.
Yeah.
That's so good. That's for the board game episode.
Or Trouble.
With
the
Mike,
board game
with Mike
episode.
Rubino. That's the.
Oh,
that's the
well. Also, our friend Shannon Norman collects board games as well.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, that's a group episode right there. That could be a live episode, board games. But we're talking about video games now.
Yeah.
We already were going back and forth on video game stories and things like that. And what was Jace? What was your first system?
So my first system, the first thing I ever played a game on was a Commodore 64, which was a plug and go. It was just a keyboard that I plugged it into a 8-inch black and white television, and the only game that I played was Transylvania.
That's like back when to load the game you had to type in like 3.5 pages of code.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you had to actually type in code, and there were no graphics with this version. So all it was me giving direction to my guy, and then it would kick back and tell me what I was seeing in the room. So I actually had to visualize what was going on in the room. And it would come back and say, like, you can't do that and things like that.
It's like that movie wasn't Fred Savage playing that at the beginning of Never Ending Story or something?
You mixed up like 7 different movies.
I know. No, it was Big.
It was the beginning of Big.
Yeah.
But that did have at least a little bit of graphics. That had
that's
the picture
right.
of the wizard. Yeah.
Right,
He was trying to get past the ice wizard.
The Ice Wizard, that's right.
Yeah, and I don't know, like, so that would have been like 1982.
So you had to put in a punch card to play video games?
I had to do a whole thing. Now that was my own home system because for us, it was all about going to the game room. The arcade.
Oh,
that's
dude.
what it was about. I mean, there was a whole process for me and what that was all about.
I was just telling somebody how there was a pretty decent arcade at now this Century 3 Mall outside of Pittsburgh that has made its way through BuzzFeed and like it's a ghost mall
house. Yeah,
it's a ghost mall. But we would go there a lot.
Oh yeah.
But I can't remember what we would play.
It started with Street Fighter 2.
Yeah.
It became Mortal Kombat.
That's right.
And then then Mortal Kombat held. You know, the Prime game always got like as soon as you walked in, it'd be the first game as soon as you walked in because they were trying to lure you in.
Yeah,
right.
And so the Prime spot first started with Street Fighter 2, then Street Fighter 2 Championship Edition, then Street Fighter 2 Turbo, and then it became Mortal Kombat, and then Mortal Kombat held that position.
Yeah, that's right.
For the rest of the mall's lifetime.
Yeah, that's man, and pinball. We could talk about all that. We'll get to that.
I enjoyed pinball, but I never really like got into it. Like,
it was terrible.
If it was in the room,
oh my
god,
I love pinball.
I'm good. Cause I mean, it's just I
loved it because once again, looking down at certain pinball machines, it looked like Mousetrap the game. You're like, oh, I want the ball to go in Indiana Jones' mine cart, and it's going to go up the mountain, and it's going to jump in a snake's mouth. And then you can never make the ball actually do those things. Yeah. So the whole time you're just trying to get it to activate the little items.
Oh yeah, I've always been just fascinated with the design of pinball machines.
Oh, yeah.
Like that's why I fell in love with them first because just like how they designed the ramps, but not only that was all the design, like the graphic design. It was always so cool to me. Like I loved, like I'd be not playing and I'd be looking over at pinball machines' faces and the graphic design. Like, look at that tiny little picture they did way back there that nobody sees.
Yeah, they're work
It's like
of art.
that weird.
They're also a work of art just by if you've ever seen the inside of one, like all the little levers and gauges and wires and pistons and everything that's going on in there is just unbelievable.
That's fascinating. But so you had a Commodore 64.
Then went to the Atari.
Your biker parents got you the Commodore 64?
Yeah.
That's nice.
Yeah.
That was nice of them.
Yeah, no.
You had a decent childhood. And then you got Atari.
Then we had the Atari, and then it went into
82.
82 would have been the Commodore.
Wow.
Because the reason why I know that is because I looked at the game Transylvania before coming to do this, and I was like, that was the first game that triggered. So I went and looked at it, and the text version versus the graphic version wasn't until 84.
Wow. So wait, so the first game you played was Transylvania. Well, that makes sense for like if it's only a text game.
Yeah.
It makes sense that it would be a scary one, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what it was, right? It was like you go into the.
Yeah, you were basically a vampire hunter, if I remember correctly.
Cool.
So I'd have to look at it again, that in depth, but yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So then it went to the
and then Atari.
Yep.
Did you have Atari, Chris?
I did. Yeah.
I didn't have Atari.
It wasn't my Atari, but I grew up in a house with my 2 older cousins.
Oh,
and
yeah.
It was my oldest cousin's Atari.
Nice.
They always had cooler technology way ahead of its time. So they had I remember my cousin had a modem in the early 80s. The ones where you literally had to set the phone into the little console to actually communicate with other computers.
Way.
Oh, yeah. And so, they had an Atari that I was obsessed with.
I think we've all had, like, a friend or a relative that was always, like, steps and years ahead. Like, I remember I had a friend that had a Laserdisc collection.
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like,
Chris and I will say his name at the exact same time, who our tech friend was, and that's Alan Schultz.
Yeah.
Alan has been a guest. He was on one of our Avengers episodes for Handle the Truth podcast. That's a movie review podcast that I do with Sean Collier. But he had laser discs. He had I remember him having what did he have so early that I was just? He had something like, what was it, like Sega Saturn or something?
Oh,
I can't remember.
there was-
All I remember is with Alan was
No.
the first person that I ever played a game online with, because Alan and I grew up on the same street, and so this would have been this probably would have been 1997. It was Star Wars Dark Forces 2.
Oh, that's right.
What
and
year?
It would have been like 96 maybe.
Yeah.
I know what you're talking about.
Maybe 97. And it was, you could do online play, but you had to dial in just computer to computer. And so it was just basically
So
one
this is
versus 1v1 shooting and killing each other with lightsabers. That's it. There was like, the computers obviously couldn't handle 10 versus 10 or anything like that.
And that was like you had to dial up your computer like you would for AOL.
Yes, you had to dial it into your friend's computer.
And isn't it so funny that Alan, our friend Alan, has been the guy, because what I describe, he is still doing as an adult. Where he will walk you through how to set it up.
Yes.
Right?
But since we lived on the same street, as we were trying to set this up, we just kept running back and forth to each other's houses. Like, is it on? Is it up? And you couldn't talk to each other yet. So after a match, you would just run to one of the other person's house. But, oh my gosh, can you believe did you see how I did that? Like,
because you couldn't call on the phone.
You couldn't call on the phone because you were dialed
online.
in. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so after every match, we'd run over and like meet in the street and just start talking about like what just took place.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
oh my God.
That's so funny.
PC gaming.
Oh my gosh.
That is. That's too funny.
What? Oh! I know what I was gonna bring up. One of the friends that, there was always that friend that had the most video games.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, I remember in the projects, there wasn't anybody like that.
Yeah.
There was nobody.
Yeah.
Like, we didn't have anybody like that.
Kids of the projects were all leaving the projects to other neighborhoods to go play.
Yeah, pretty
Nintendo.
much.
Yeah.
For anybody who grew up where we grew up, they'd be like, we got to go to Calhoun to play to play Narcs.
Yeah. Final Fight's out. We got to get to someone's street.
That's true. No, but a good friend of mine, comedian friend, John Evans, he's the last comic standing, whatever. He grew up in Tulsa, and his dad worked high up for Atari. And he has some amazing stories about how he was the kid that everyone came over. He said he remembers playing like games that didn't even have the labels yet. And his dad would come home with a game with a Sharpie written on it. And was like, here, you want to try out E.T.?
So he worked for like somebody like ColecoVision or somebody.
He
like
worked
that.
for Atari.
You have to see. They just released this book called The Art of Atari. That I got for Christmas. That was amazing.
Oh,
It's
wow,
all the paintings, all the game art, the cartridge art,
great.
the instruction art, the
Who got you
promotional
that?
art. My wife.
Ooh, she's good.
My wife.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
My wife.
My wife.
But it's what's crazy about the stories is essentially they were hiring painters. I mean, these guys were painting.
Yeah.
These great illustrations. And they would go to one of their illustrators, one of their hired illustrators, and they would describe the mechanics of the game. The people didn't even play the games. They would just come and describe the game. Wow. So they would come and describe something like Defender. And they'd be like, well, you're this little ship, and you're going to go in sideways, and you're kind of doing this thing and that. And then they'd be like, make us some art for it. So the painter was essentially creating the story world of these games in their painting, and that's how these games were getting stories. It wasn't the game designers themselves. So the game designers a lot of times, would create,
They just came up with like a gimmick.
They came up with a gimmick. It'd be like a little block going through a maze or going through a thing, and then the person would be like, well, that's kind of like a labyrinth, so maybe it's kings and castles, and they would just come up with.
And this guy would come back with a painting, and they'd be like, that's
genius. They'd be like,
Yeah.
that's the game.
I remember looking at those when you get the book and you take the manual out of the Atari game when you got that and you look at it. I remember looking at those pictures and then playing the game and going back to the picture and being like, wouldn't it be great if it actually looked like this?
If it actually looked
because
like
it didn't, and then now you.
But
fast
there is
forward,
something fun about the fact that so many of those early guys, like, okay, you take Berserk for an example. Berserk is like, you're that space guy with a gun, and you're going around shooting aliens or whatever. On the screen, it's just these crude little blocks or whatever. Yeah. But by seeing the painting,
that's such a
now
great point.
Your imagination
You're
is filling in the
imagining
blanks. Yes, you're
dude.
imagining the
Yeah,
dude.
that's
Yes.
great.
Yeah.
That continued on. Like, I remember seeing art in like Nintendo, like Nintendo Power and stuff. You remember some of the art? Seriously, some of the art of Mario and Zelda and Link, and you're like, holy hell! Like, it was dope art.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
Because there's certainly, especially with something like Zelda, there's certain those monsters where you'd see him and be like, that guy kind of looks like a stack of pancakes.
Yeah, what is that?
Like, remember as a kid, if you didn't know the thing's name, you just like, almost in your neighborhood, everyone would know that monster.
You'd be like, oh, Pancake Dude?
Pancake Dude.
Oh,
Dude,
yeah.
Get away from Pancake Dude, he steals your shield.
Oh, Rockmouth?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then you'd look at the instruction book and be like, oh, that's a mouse thing, or, you know,
It'd be like, no, that's a Ziergorg.
Yeah,
You're
exactly.
like, no, that's
like
Pancake Mouth.
Forever, I always have this long-running gag with my wife because for the longest time when they played Mario, she thought Lakitu, which is the guy that's inside a cloud that throws the spiky balls down, she thought that was just a cloud with a bow on it, so she thought it was a female cloud that was like spitting. But I'm like, okay, if you really look at it, I'm like, okay, you can kind of see the bow up there, stuff like that. Had no idea. Not until you look at artwork do you see like, oh no, that's an actual like that's a Koopa up there riding in a cloud.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
He just has glasses.
So what was your first?
Mine was Nintendo, and
was the original 8-bit like.
I don't know what version it was. I do know
Wait, did you have any of the Tiger handheld ones before the actual
I had
home console?
one. I had one. We'll get into handhelds.
Handhelds.
No, I got Nintendo for Christmas, I believe in third or fourth grade.
What year?
Oh geez.
What year were you? Third, fourth grade.
96.
2004, Jason, actually. No, I probably got it definitely 3 or 4 years late. I do remember my stepbrother got Nintendo. You know, we've talked about it on the show. I come from an abusive childhood and blah, blah, blah. We moved around. And guys, talk to your kids about abuse. No. But no, like I remember my stepbrother got a Nintendo and I never got to play it because we moved out. And I was like, oh, that's a neat thing I heard about. So I didn't get it for a couple years later. And I remember, it's a funny story. I remember getting the Nintendo and my mom did one of those things where she's like, I'm going to hide the last present and be like, that's it. There's nothing left. Right. And so my mom hid it and she brought it out. And then towards the, like later in the day, I think we were like leaving to go to, you know, you go get your meals, you go to your relative's house or whatever. Right. And I remember thinking like, oh, like I want to like just open the box of the Nintendo and check out the Nintendo and the Zapper, you know, and we couldn't.
You got the Zapper system too.
See, like that was,
I didn't have the Zapper.
That was years later.
Yeah.
And now that I think about it too, I'm like, wow, like my mom worked her ass off to pay for that because
easily.
My mom had 2 jobs almost her whole life. Yeah. So I'm like, wow, my mom was, you know.
And it wasn't cheap.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at some of those.
How much was a Nintendo then?
I don't know. I don't know. I'm gonna take a look. But
well, I mean, you know, I was like, yeah, my mom must have been showing some cleavage.
I vaguely remember.
She's selling herself.
Showing some cleavage being a
I
bartender.
remember at some point the Zapper system was like $130.
Oh, really?
$140, but that was later.
Yeah.
Oh,
so it's possible that was $200 when it first came out.
Well,
I know the Super Nintendo was like $200, maybe $250
that's right.
when it first came out.
I think it was $199. I think you're right.
Which one was
The
that?
Super Nintendo.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, that was pretty
I never messed
pricey.
with that one.
But even still, let's say it's even $100 when it first came out. You're talking about 1986, 87, $100. Like that's the equivalent of a PS4 now.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. So the deluxe, set retailing at $199, which is the equivalent of $481. And this is dated 2016. That included the light gun. So and called the Zapper.
So it's like my mom
2
spent almost
controllers
$500 on
and
it.
2 game packs. It came with Gyromite and Duck Hunt.
Oh,
the
I remember
basic
Gyromite.
set. Now this is the one that I would have had because I didn't have the Zapper gun.
Yeah,
came with
basic.
1 controller and Mario Brothers. That was it. That retailed at $89.99.
That's not bad.
See, I had the.
Oh, that's
came
with no game. 99. There's the 100. I thought 100 to
I
105
thought 100. Yeah,
was a
$100.
number I had in my head.
I just heard so many numbers. I have no idea what we're talking
Math. Yeah, so it was 89 with no game. It was 99 that came with Super Mario Brothers.
Wow.
And that's the one that we generally had.
Yeah.
You know? My buddy had the deluxe one. He was the one that always was ahead of the game. We'd be playing Duck Hunt.
I remember I
never
got the
once owned
Zapper.
No.
I played it at a friend's house, and like
I wasn't.
And I always only had a couple games. Well, let me tell you about the day. Finish this story. So, I just wanted I was looking for the Nintendo, thinking like I just wanted to open it up right just before we leave. You know, kids, right? And I was like, "Where's my Nintendo box?" I'm like, Mom, where did you put the Nintendo box? And my grandmother was there. She might have like slept over Christmas Eve or something like it was something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know why she was there, but then we were like, "Where's it at?" And my mom was like, "Oh my God, I saw your grandma carry that outside to the dumpster." I swear to God. And so because
grandma
because
we lived throat punched.
We lived in an apartment building behind a bar and a convenience store.
Graham saw that thing was worth $500. She's like, this sucker's going back to the store.
Yeah, she went right to the Pat bus. And for anybody from Pittsburgh, this is where we grew up behind Isley's and Carrick. That's where we were. So the dumpster was right. So we took a bunch of boxes out and threw them away, like wrapping paper. Went out. Sure enough, I just remember my grandmother leaning over a dumpster, like peeking into, like reaching into a dumpster, and sure enough, there was my Nintendo Entertainment System in the dumpster.
What was her? She just thought it was trash.
My grandma don't give a shit. She don't care about nothing. She just
wow.
Apparently it's light, but it's not like.
I don't know.
That's weird. She's like, this styrofoam.
She saw
this
a
box.
gun. She saw a television screen lighting up with monsters. She thought the
like,
devil is in this box.
She had to throw it away. Lutheran Graham. So that was my first one. But then my uncle, who I would visit in the summer times, we've talked about this before on the podcast. I would go visit and shoot guns and hunt and fish and things like that and camp out with my uncle but one of the things, he was super into flea markets. He was crazy about flea markets, and by the time I hit middle school, my uncle had bought every single video game system he possibly could and every game he ever saw at any flea market. He'd be at a flea market, there'd be 20 Nintendo games. He's like, here you go. Because he would buy them for all the kids that would come visit. Because he had grandkids at the time, same age as me, like, and I called them my cousins, because he was from a previous marriage. He had a bunch of grandkids and nieces and nephews, so they would visit. My side of the family, we had kids, my cousins, my sister, so he would just have this room, and we called it the video game room. And he just had a dresser, a tall 4-foot dresser with drawers full of games.
Oh my gosh.
So full of Nintendo games, full of Sega games. It was Nintendo and Sega, that's what he had. Okay. And then later on, when I was in high school, he got like a PlayStation, But dude, going up there when I was like 12, 13 in the summer times, and I just like all those games, you would just be like, what's this one? What's this one? Next one. I just want to try. Yeah. You would play them for 30 seconds just to see the title screen, And I remember I couldn't until we ate breakfast, until I went out and cut the grass, or until I chopped wood. Like I was only allowed to play video games like between like lunch and but if it was nice out, you're not allowed. I was always like, please, can I just play?
Well, I just remember with Nintendo games, you kind of everybody on the street kind of pooled their games together. So it's like you wouldn't buy a game if your neighbor had it or one of your friends have it, because well, he already has it. We can already play. So I just remember so many times, I remember, I was the one that had the first Zelda game. So it would be, I'd either take it to a friend's house or they'd come to our house. And I remember just us all huddled around trying to figure it out together. Because, that was all about, oh my God, they never told you where certain dungeons were or things were. So I just remember all the neighbor kids being huddled around trying to figure out that stuff. And it was then another friend had Batman the movie game. Oh my gosh. So it's I'm not going to go buy that game because he's just going to come over and just play it.
Wow.
I mean, just hours playing on a game that you knew you had to finish because you couldn't save it.
I know.
That's the thing. My biggest moment of remembering that story was playing Goonies. Goonies.
Holy
game.
moly.
And there were two, actually. There was Goonies 2.
Oh, that's right.
But sitting there at my buddy's house at 3 in the morning, we're in 9th grade. Of just taking turns to beat this game.
That was also Super Mario Bros. 3. I'm just it's just this massive game that
you have to keep
playing.
You
just have to keep playing.
And then after that came save codes. If I'm trying to remember
there were certain ones that had it. There were games before Super Mario Bros. 3 that had it. So
Legend of Zelda.
Zelda, right out of the gate.
Yeah, you had to write the codes down.
Well, no, it didn't have codes. Zelda would save it for you because it had a watch battery inside of it.
That's right.
The ones that could actually save your game have a watch battery in them. So Metroid.
This is on
Metroid. Yeah.
This on Super Nintendo.
No, NES.
No, Nintendo.
Zelda could save your game. Metroid could save your game. Metroid might have had codes.
Oh, you know what else?
Mega Man had codes.
Mega Man had codes. Maniac Mansion. You could save games. Okay. I loved that game. That was one of the first like point and click adventure kind of haunted house.
Yeah.
Kind of search a drawer, things like that.
Yep.
What was your, if you could name your top, what are we gonna do? 3 Nintendo games or 5?
You gotta do it. At
5?
Minimum 3.
5. Top, whatever. 3 to 5.
Okay, this is easy for me.
Okay.
Just Nintendo.
Nintendo.
I'm gonna
Just
probably
Nintendo?
agree with half of yours.
Yeah, probably. For me personally, Legend of Zelda is probably my number 1. That sucker blew me away.
Legend of Zelda is my favorite.
Number 2 for me is probably Mike Tyson's Punch-Out.
Whoa.
Yeah, which is maybe...
Never into that. I remember you talking about it.
Oh, my gosh.
The stand-up machine, the actual game before
those
Tyson.
were great. Yeah.
Playing in
When
the
it was
hills.
just Punch-Out.
Playing in the hills. We would play that in the hills lobby and just sit there and just the whole time body blow. That's all you heard. Body blow.
Oh,
And
yeah.
And the
Mike
guy
Tyson's
was
Punch-Out.
the guy was green. Remember
Yep.
the actual the guy was green. That you go through?
The problem with Punch-Out, like playing it nowadays, is it's tough to play that game on anything but a Nintendo controller. It's like, so you'll get them on like say the Virtual Console on the Wii, or you just download an emulator. But it's like it was made so perfectly for that Nintendo controller.
Wow.
Funny story about Punch-Out. Remember they always had that cut scene where Little Mac was training in front of the Statue of Liberty. When I was a kid, he's running in a pink jumpsuit. He's running in a pink sweatsuit, so it's pink.
Yeah.
He looks sad. He's running away from a mean-looking black guy on a bike, or he's chasing a mean-looking black guy on his bike, who is his trainer.
But
they gave him evil eyes.
Isn't he tethered to him?
No, he's just chasing him.
He's just chasing him. Why do I think he's tethered to him?
You have like
familiar,
mean-looking black guy on a bike, like riding it away,
Yeah.
and someone in a pink sweatsuit chasing him. So when I was a kid, I thought that was Mike Tyson stealing this little girl's bike, and that's why I had to beat Mike Tyson at the end. I thought they were just like setting up the story.
The
like,
whole point of the game.
Mike Tyson stole a girl's bike, and I have to beat him up now. And when it wasn't until, no joke,
that son of a bitch
years later that I was like, oh, he's training.
So all of your chivalry comes from beating up Mike Tyson
okay, so
to win a little girl's heart.
And
Mike
that first
Tyson's
time you went
Punch-Out.
up against Tyson, when you finally got past Sandman.
Oh, I didn't see Tyson until easily. I mean, when you found out the code.
The cheat code.
When I found out the cheat code, I could finally see him. I did not make it all the way through the game to beat Tyson until college. Not until college did I finally get good enough to.
Yeah.
Still to this day,
It's funny. I kind of remember you celebrating that.
oh gosh,
You beat
it was a
Mike
big
Tyson.
deal.
That's
It was
huge.
a big deal.
'Cause that's years. That's years of trying to figure that out.
I beat it in Mike Hill's bedroom with
oh my God.
Mike Hill, Darren Belichick,
That
and Jeff
apartment.
Geis. Yeah.
That
no, it was at
apartment.
his parents'
Oh
house.
my
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So Zelda, Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, Super Mario Brothers 3. I'm also gonna probably put in Super Mario Brothers 2 because they're such drastically different games.
And they're so good.
And last but not least, and I don't think anyone on earth is going to agree with me on this, but this was my very first Nintendo game, so by default it is my favorite, Jaws.
I'm gonna agree. Look, my 5, Legend of Zelda, Jaws, Gunsmoke.
Gunsmoke was
Dude, I loved Gunsmoke. I would have to say, okay, there was a game that I played nonstop that I got from my uncle. He would get those crazy games.
Yep.
And it was one of those special games that weren't made by Nintendo. Okay. It was like the cartridge was a different shape even. Remember?
Oh, those companies all got sued.
And I heard later, but it was a light blue powder game. And there was like it was totally shaped differently. It was called Crystal Mines. Dude, you had to hit select, and you had 3 different ways to break open. Like it'd be like ice, diamond, or rock, and like it was kind of like a grid, kind of like the bomb dude. What's the bomb game?
Dig Dug?
Oh no, Kaboom.
No,
Bomberman?
Yeah, Bomberman and Dig Dug, same kind of concept.
Okay.
But you were like this like archaeologist, and there was like ghosts and aliens, and you'd have to like
Crystal Mines.
Crystal Mines, dude. It was
I
so
love
fun.
those, like, it was always like the religious stores, like the Christian bookstores always sold those
they
weird,
had 'em.
the weird shape.
Oh, yeah.
And
Really?
the cartridges that they would
Yeah,
sell,
they did.
you'd randomly see these like when you'd
Yeah.
rent the game.
Yep.
Sometimes they'd be at game rental places.
Oh, they had like Bible games.
Yeah,
oh, yeah.
but they always had bizarre instructions. It was like, to play this game, put it in, hit reset 3 times, take the game out, put it back in, hold select start, just to get it to work. It always had bizarre instructions.
Oh, that's right. That's
because
wild.
they were bypassing some like Nintendo.
Oh,
protection.
and then if I would have to say number 5, it would be Punisher. I loved because it was the first. It was a first-person shooter.
Yeah.
And it was a side-scroll first-person shooter.
You were the crosshair.
And you were the crosshairs. And it had real damage.
Yeah.
It had
You could,
environment
blow
damage.
up anything. Yeah.
It would bullet holes would go in the garbage cans and stuff. And dude, growing up with action movies, and I was just like, I was like, this game is amazing. And
I gotta be surprised. Maybe Punisher fulfilled this for you. I thought for sure Contra would be somewhere in your top 5.
well, I'm just saying, like, how many games? I had to limit it to 5.
Yeah.
But, you know, if you listen to Sean Collier and I on Handle the Truth podcast, we always have all these honorable mentions.
Yeah.
Contra's an honorable mention. It was so much fun. I could play it over and over and over.
Yeah.
And then I'm just naming all these favorite games. Narcs. Narcs was like was Punisher, but a little bit different side scroller. I mean, dude, they had body parts. Like, you blew guys up and there was body parts. It was crazy. And you would collect drug money and cocaine and needles.
What was this?
Narcs. Look it up.
Okay.
It's crazy. And I remember telling my mom about the game, and she's like, hold up. Like, what? It was, I mean, dude, it was that was a pretty rough game. Yeah. But I can't decide. When you said Mario Brothers 2 and 3, I can't decide which one I like more.
Yeah.
I honestly liked 2 a little bit more.
That's
because
game,
of the floating princess.
Floating princess.
I love the floating princess.
Yeah.
What?
Crystal Mines is available on Amazon.
Oh.
There's 8 of them, used and new at $26.99 a pop.
I'm getting it.
And
Crystal Mines.
And it is actually, it's 100 levels.
Yeah, dude.
That feature a mixture of puzzles and action mechanics.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah,
Oh, you know what I liked too? It was similar to that, and it was also a special game, was Solomon's Key.
Oh, yeah. That
what
was
a great
puzzle
game.
Yeah, that was a great puzzle game.
And you know what? I can't not mention Micro Machines. Did you play that?
Where you
Had
were
the
like
gold
riding
cartridge.
Yeah, you were like riding on like a pool table.
Yep.
And stuff like that.
So good. You'd be on the breakfast table.
Yeah.
Which is sort of like the same game. What was the other one? RC
Pro-Am?
Pro-Am. Yeah.
Wow, what
that
a
was
fun
another
game.
one.
And what platform was that on, though?
That was Nintendo.
Was that Nintendo?
That was
Yeah,
Nintendo.
yeah.
That was an early Nintendo game.
That was a fun
early.
game.
Wow.
That was a really fun game.
And then I guess honorable mention, you got to give Metroid an honorable mention.
Yeah,
it was, like, just massive.
dude, I didn't get into Metroid.
It wasn't until
probably
later.
till I met you or Alan.
Yeah, it was
I was like, oh, Metroid.
I don't think I actually even played it for the first time.
Didn't even know about it.
Honestly, until maybe college.
Wow,
I just didn't own it. Yeah.
Wow.
Maybe I rented it, but.
Well, we're gonna let me brief shout outs.
I don't get to give my 5?
No, yeah.
You skip my ass?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
We're gonna do your 5. We're gonna do your 5.
All right, here's my 5.
And then we're gonna take a quick
Keeping
break.
it simple. I'm not going to give like a 5-minute dissertation on how many levels I have to beat like you did.
That's what.
So I'm going original.
That's
I'm going
what
first game ever Mario Brothers. That was my top one. Excite Bike.
Wait, Super Mario Brothers?
Super Mario
Okay,
Brothers.
so
Yes,
we're
not
Mario.
Mario Brothers.
Okay.
Super Mario Brothers. Excite Bike.
Excite Bike
Custom
was
tracks.
Could build when you could
Custom
build your own
tracks.
tracks.
hours.
Yeah.
Hours.
That game I remember. My brother's 5 years older than me, so he was
You to
not
get
in
those
a
speed
gamer.
things and then an H ramp that would launch you up.
Oh, that game was so fun. And then to get back on your bike when you wrecked and you had to go back and forth to the bike.
Yeah,
run
it was
faster.
like going
Excite
back.
Bike was a great one. Contra, as we said, was up there with mine. And then when the code came, it
Up,
was
up,
just
down,
all
left, right,
just-
left, right, BA,
everyone
BA,
knows
select, start. You know what I hate is when people take that Contra code and put it towards other things like in TV and movies.
Yeah.
Or they'll be like, the code, up, up, down. I'm like, oh, that's Contra.
Yeah.
Or no, someone misquoted that on a television show and said that the code to get to the 8th level in Super Mario Brothers 3 was up, up, down, down. And I was so mad.
Shut up.
I know.
It's worked on other Konami games.
Is that right?
It does work on other
wow.
Konami games, yeah.
So that's
What
3
else?
for me. 4 I already mentioned was Goonies. That thing was.
Dude, I gotta play that.
I had a blast with that game. I mean, it was just a side scroller. It was you, and you had your slingshot.
Yeah.
And as you just went after, and you had to get away from the family.
Yeah.
I mean, it was the whole thing. And then Super Tech Mobile.
Yeah.
Just
dude.
listen.
Yeah.
I kept stat books. Like I had my notebook.
That's funny.
And after every play, I would mark down, and they're probably at my mom's house. Notebooks filled, like because you couldn't save to have a career, so I built my own career in my own notebooks. So I would be able to know how many yards rushing that I had and who was the leader.
He was like a damn commissioner.
Yeah,
I love it.
Yeah, and then my honorable mention was track and field. Which was crazy because that's when you would actually lose. You would actually build blisters on your fingers.
Oh yeah.
Because to run across and you go like this.
You didn't get
the
pencil. The
pencil,
bro.
Yeah, the pencil's another one.
The pencil.
Yeah. Or you just go by, what was the thing called? The Max? The NES
the Max. Yeah.
Turbo.
I never had that. My uncle, of course, had that.
Yeah.
You know,
if you walked in with like a Game Genie, I'm beating the shit out of you. Because
Dude,
we gotta go.
When my
I don't have time
uncle
for cheating.
got a Game Genie,
Ugh.
it blew my mind.
Yeah.
And like I remember playing Punisher with Game Genie, and I was like, infinite ammo?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
It was amazing. Jason, I just want to point out that all your favorite games were chronological, the 1 through 5 released Nintendo games.
Yeah, there you go.
They were the oldest Nintendo games ever made.
Popeye, Popeye.
He was
Popeye
Jason's
was
like, I like the Super Mario Brothers beta version.
Yeah.
That was 3 years. I'm just kidding.
It's all good.
That's it. I'm out of old jokes.
good.
I'm out of old jokes. That's a no more. Man, dude, now I want to really play Nintendo. My
favorite part about Nintendo was when you go to Toys R Us to buy a new game and you just had to get that little slip. They didn't have games sitting out. They weren't paying you to get the slip and take it to the special window.
Like you're at Sam's Club buying a pallet of something.
It felt special. It felt like you were going through a whole process of doing this thing. You know.
Well, it's good they did that because I would have stolen a lot of Nintendo games.
You're a good piece of shit.
Yeah, well, I am, Jason, and so are you. Okay, we've discussed this. We are both pieces of shit.
But you give them that paper, and the person would walk away, and they would leave your sight for a few
in that
minutes.
room. They go in that special room.
Yeah, and you'd be
just
waiting, and then
you just had that vision that you walk back there, and it was just wall games. Like,
and they'd come back out with that box.
Yeah. Real quick, did you rent games? Did you go rent?
Oh, of course.
We rented some games. Yeah. I didn't rent games for a while.
Yeah, because I didn't have like a whole circle like you guys had, the whole neighborhood where you just met. I'll trade you this.
Oh yeah.
There was only a handful of people that had game systems.
Oh
so
yeah.
It wasn't widespread amongst our groups of friends.
Oh no, we totally rented. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But the rental place by us, Video Spotlight.
Video Spotlight.
Only had one of every game.
Yeah.
That's
so
right.
Like if someone had it, you
would wait for people to bring it back. I remember.
Yeah, I remember we just hang out in this rental place for a couple hours.
Wait for somebody's dad to drop it off.
Yeah. Because you wanted to try, playing Yo Noid, the game.
We're
Yo Noid.
Oh my God, Noid. We're gonna pause for a second.
Yeah.
We're gonna give a couple shout outs. Every week we always say where we're gonna be, where we're performing, but if you're listening, this weekend I'm in Albany, at the Funny Bone in Albany. Yeah. I'll be in Albany, and then we have Stand Up Get Down Easter weekend at Arcade Comedy Theater. Stand Up Get Down is Jason and I's.
Sure.
We have the stand-up comedy game show. That's April 14th, Friday, at Arcade Comedy Theater. Then I'll be in Harrisburg. Then I'll be in Chicago and Wichita and Tulsa in April and May and bingo.
Yeah.
You're on Stand Up Get Down.
That's it. Yeah, that's it. That's all I have right now. I don't have anything else.
Jason also has a blog about being the oldest dad that I know. I'm just kidding. Chris, you can find all kinds of stuff. Where can we find stuff that you're doing fun?
You can find me in my yard this weekend, just cleaning the back porch and getting the flyers in the gardens ready.
Get those flowers.
Get the flyers.
Yeah.
No, I do a weekly show, or I co-write and direct a weekly show called Pittsburgh Dad. So if you're dad, you'll get a lot of humor out of it.
Yeah, even if you're not from Pittsburgh, it's still funny. It's everybody's dads.
Yeah, it's just
okay. Well,
it could be called middle class dad, Midwest dad.
Yes,
that's the same thing.
I mean, really, if your dad is from Malibu, he's not going to be
that
like him.
may be a stretch. Yes, yeah.
Or he's an Inuit
Malibu,
in Anchorage.
Yes, or Canadian dad, maybe not.
I already bought that website, Jason.
Yeah.
Did you buy that domain?
Paid for.
Yep. If you want to see some of my other film work, just Google the words Echo Torch or Mercury Men.
Listen to this son of a bitch.
Google either one of those.
Just Google me.
Just Google.
Okay, you can Google me too.
You can just Google me because I found out that there are only 11 people in the whole country with my last name, and 8 of them are my family.
Wow, really?
And I also found that I'm literally the only Chris Preksta on planet Earth.
Wow.
Yes.
Ancestry.com does shit for you.
Well, I find out that at Ancestry.com, that's our sponsor this week. Holler at your boy.
Bing, bing, bing,
it's
bing.
not at all. If we say something, it's our sponsor.
It's your sponsor, okay.
Yeah, there's another Aaron Kleiber, and he's in Texas, and he's 75.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, that's interesting.
There may be other Chris Prekstas, but they're on the underground. They're off the grid because the censuses have not found them.
Possible.
I would love to think that there's another one living in the woods.
like a Ted Krasinski?
Yeah, just waiting to be called on by some government special
Amazing.
officer.
The alternate Chris
Amazing.
Preksta.
That's it. That's it for that. I want to move into the second part of the show. The show. I'm like we're on ESPN radio. The second part of the show, we'll be talking about the legacy of Terry Bradshaw. No, I mean,
actually spelled cats.
But what's interesting is that none of us said Sega, and so I have 2 guys I grew up with. I call my brothers. They're my brothers, John and Nick. They had Sega.
Yeah.
And my wife, she had Sega. Mm-hmm. She got a Sega. Isn't that cute? She got a Sega when she was like 15.
I had one in middle school. Wasn't my first, but I got one later in middle school.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, so you had 2 systems.
And a Super Nintendo.
Dang, dude.
Yeah.
I think I got a Super Nintendo maybe in like 8th grade.
I mean, each one of these was purchased like years later. Yeah. It wasn't like, and the Genesis had been out for a long time by the time I got it.
Oh yeah, I mean,
Genesis? Remember, Genesis was out during Nintendo.
Sure,
it was Nintendo.
It was a couple years later. It wasn't.
Yeah, it wasn't at the exact same time.
It was
but
like 2-3 years
close,
later. Yeah. I think it didn't come out in 88, 89.
But yeah,
something like that.
There, yeah.
Do you remember any of your favorite Sega games?
Sonic 2.
Sonic 2 was great. Yeah. You know what was really
Mortal
good?
Mortal Kombat with blood.
Mortal Kombat, dude.
Oh, yeah.
That was
Eternal Champions, that fighting game.
Dude, yes.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. You know what was a lot of fun? Aladdin.
Oh, Aladdin was a good one.
Really good game.
X-Men for Genesis was really good.
Oh, that was
you got
so
to pick
good.
which character you wanted to be.
Oh my gosh. I can't remember.
X-Men was one of these games that had this really weird and outside of the box way of beating a boss. You would get to this one boss in the middle of the game and you'd beat him and the game would not let you go any further. It would not let you. It would just and time would run out and you would just die. And for a month. I'm like, what is it? What do I do? I'm like, the game's broken, whatever. Before you started the level, Professor Xavier would always tell you, you're on this mission to reset the computer. I'm like, okay, I gotta go beat some boss and reset the computer. No, what he really meant is reset the Genesis. So the way to beat the boss is after you beat the boss, you
that's right.
Reset on the Genesis and it would take you to the next board.
That's right.
I'm like, what 9-year-old kid is going to think of that?
Also genius.
Yeah, that's so good.
Well, I remember just a couple random asides. Does anybody have any random video game system asides? I remember my brother got he got Sega Saturn, and that came with but they got Lethal Enforcers. It was that cop shooting game, and dude, I just remember playing a shooting game at home, and it was just. There wasn't Duck Hunt.
Yeah.
And it was just, it was phenomenal.
I remember Sega CD. I never had it, but I remember thinking,
playing that stuff.
Oh, that's the creme de la creme.
Oh,
that's like the holy grail.
Nobody had that.
Yeah.
Nobody we knew had it.
Not
in our school district.
Full motion video. I remember all the rumors of Neo Geo costing like $1,000, and each game cost $300. I just remember if you were rich, you had a Neo Geo. One funny aside, the only reason I had a Super Nintendo is because my grandfather won the lottery.
Is that right?
So he won the lottery for $10,000.
Wow.
Won the lottery for $10,000. Rolled up to my house and was like,
he boxed it.
He was like, you know that Nintendo you've been staring at up at Hills? Why don't we go pick that up?
That's nice. One offside system, an older one, was in television.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Dang.
And I only knew there was a friend of my dad's
That had that weird,
that had that
Jason,
numbers.
you're 100 years
It had
old.
that weird
It was
numbers
really
pad
weird.
like it was a cell phone.
Yeah.
The controller had
yeah,
numbers.
yeah.
Oh, that's
the
right.
graphics were something like you didn't see on anything.
Was that the one that had the knob on it too?
Yes.
Oh, that's
yeah,
right.
the controller was like a good 8 inches long.
Wow.
And you held it vertically.
Like you were landing a lunar module.
Yeah. It
Wow.
was nuts. But the first Sega did come out in 86.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
1986, they came out with the Master version.
That's right.
In 1986, they released their the Master System.
Yep.
And they produced that till 92. And
wow.
then, I went through a time where it was just right into Sega, and then Sega just I was at that point, I was living in an apartment and living on my own, and it was just Madden for me. It was just that's all I played.
We're gonna end this episode right at really. I mean, in
Genesis was 89, August of 89.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Really, we got to end this episode with Super Nintendo.
Oh,
I mean, dude, Super Nintendo
I've got nothing.
changed the game.
Yeah.
At that point, Jason was already an adult piece of shit.
No. Super Nintendo released it would have been my junior year of high school.
Was it really?
1991.
I was it 91?
Yeah.
Dude, I didn't get that until probably 94, 95.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I was a couple years away. Super Nintendo, man. I remember Super Mario World was phenomenal.
That's still to this day the best Mario
It
game.
really
Yeah,
is.
That's the best
I mean,
one.
the amount of levels that had and going from island to
and
island.
you could save your game.
Oh, incredible.
It was just so bad.
And Yoshi blew our minds.
yeah.
Like
I had
Everything in
very
that game.
limited Super Nintendo. I went from I was very I stayed with my Nintendo, my NES. Then I went to Sega, and once I got into a platform, I stuck with that platform. Like it took me forever to go from
Super
PlayStation
Nintendo to me lasted the longest because I'm like, we were still playing
Yeah,
Super
it
Nintendo
did.
in high school.
I mean, I probably was still messing around.
I got, like I said,
Yeah, you're right.
I was lucky enough that my grandfather won the lottery, so that we got a Super Nintendo.
Right.
But so I had it the first summer it came out until
I remember
we were
when you
still
had
playing
it.
that in high school. We were still playing Aladdin and you know I remember you guys playing hockey. You know, you guys were playing.
I remember.
EA.
Dude. Sega hockey,
Blades of
NHL.
Steel?
Blades of Steel was okay. My problem with
Was that
Blades of Steel.
Genesis?
No, Blades of
The
Steel was
NES.
Nintendo.
Yeah.
But they also had ice hockey. Ice hockey was way better than Blades of Steel, I think.
But Blades of Steel had fighting. That's
But
what
Blades of Steel
everyone-
had fighting. Ice hockey was so much more fun, but I got so frustrated with it because it was really hard when I was 10.
Ooh, what was the game where you actually had to pick the 3 different body types for?
That was
night?
ice hockey.
That
yeah.
was a great game.
Yeah,
it was
it's
great.
hard. It's
It was
just hard.
so
Yeah,
hard though.
yeah.
I didn't pick it up until I got a Nintendo later in life, and then I really enjoyed it. And that's what I have. I have that now.
Yeah.
But dude, when they came out with and I forgot. I mean, geez, how did I forget that? NHL '93, dude. I mean, dude, I'm in middle school playing at my buddy Jeremy's
Is
house.
that on EA's little system thing? you
No,
were
it
saying?
should be because I would
Okay.
play it. It goes back maybe about 4 or 5 years.
Okay.
The games you could play. But Jason's right. We need to wrap up. But dude, NHL, and then I remember when Stanley Cup came out. It was a game called Stanley Cup on Super NES. But then once you got NHL '96 on Super Nintendo, dude, sports games and Madden, dude, sports games changed forever.
Yeah, that was it.
I mean, dude, NHL '96 when you come out like bam, 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 bam. Oh my gosh, it was amazing. And then, dude, GoldenEye. That was it. That was
GoldenEye's
it.
N64.
Yeah.
GoldenEye was N64.
N64.
What did we play on Super NES?
No first-person shooters. I mean, you might have had...
I did not have that. My brothers did. And it was just
N64.
all summer.
Oh, N64,
all summer.
Yeah.
All summer we'd sleep
Oh,
over.
SNES, Super Mario World, Legend of Zelda,
Yeah.
Link to the Past.
What was-
Super Metroid was phenomenal.
Oh, yeah. What was Arcarnia? What was it?
What?
Of Time? What was that? Oh, what was it called?
Ocarina of Time. That's
Ocarina.
N64. That's N64.
That was N64.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's 20 years old now.
Now we're
that
getting
game
into
came
it.
out 20 years
Jeez.
ago.
Well, all right. That's all for this one. Then we're going to get into adult gaming. We're going to get into not sexy, okay? Not like
just
sexy.
playing Zelda butt naked.
Yeah, you know. But no, that's it. We're going to be back next week with part 2, and that's us as grown men playing video games, it was totally different for generations now. And I'm surprised Jason made it into that generation of adults playing video games.
That is our 53rd reference to my age on this podcast. We'll see you all next week.
You son of a bitch.
You're a son of a bitch.
You are.